welcome to the International Desk. I'm Lynda Kinkade at the CNN Centre. We begin with new violence across Turkey. 4 police officers and a soldier were killed in the country's southeast, while in Istanbul was hit by 2 high-profile attacks. The first at a police station. A truck bomb followed by a firefight killed 1 person and wounded 10 others. Both attackers were also killed. And outside the US consulate, 2 women opened fire. No one was hurt there, and one of the suspects was caught. They're believed to be members of a leftist organisation. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh tells us the attacks come as Turkey fights a 2-pronged battle.
We have obviously such a vast amount of activity occurring in Turkey right now today, and that will be, as I said earlier, making those in Ankara in power concerned that they're facing a number of adversaries, the ISIS potentially, although it's not clear who's behind the attacks in Istanbul, and of course the longer-term adversary of the PKK, who have been intimated as being the culprits behind the attacks in southeast Turkey.
Despite gunfire near the consulate in Istanbul, the US is getting ready to use Turkey as a staging ground for strikes against ISIS. 6 American fighter jets have been deployed to a Turkish airbase not far from the border with Syria. For more on this, we are joined by Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr. Barbara, from the people you're speaking to, what sort of impact are they hoping this increased air campaign will have?
Well, by placing these fighter jets in southern Turkey at Incirlik Air Base, they are that much closer, of course, to the border with Syria. And what their goal is to conduct a number of airstrikes along that border region. It's one of the last places along the border near there where ISIS has been able to continue to flow fighters, weapons, and equipment across the border into Syria from Turkey. So the goal here is conduct a number of airstrikes, shut that border crossing area down, and they believe they can have some real impact because they hope at least it will keep ISIS from moving more fighters, more equipment in, and using a southern route into Raqqa, Syria, which is its capital. They hope to really put a dent in ISIS capabilities. Linda?
And Barbara, this attack carried out on the US consulate in Istanbul was carried out by 2 women. They are affiliated with a radical group known as the Revolutionary People's Liberation Front. What can you tell us about that group and its ideology?
If they are indeed affiliated with them, this is said to be a leftist group, anti-government to say the least, and a group that has been responsible for attacks in the past. The US consulate in Istanbul has come under attack twice recently. Once in 2013, a Turkish security guard was actually killed in the attack there, and before that in 2008. The consulate remains closed today. We'll see what happens tomorrow. And the embassy putting out a warning a short time ago, reminding American citizens in Turkey to be very cautious, not go near the consulate for now, they say, and to be very careful when they are in any large gatherings. Linda?
Okay, Barbara Starr, thank you very much for that update from the Pentagon. We'll talk to you soon. Now, many people in the government-controlled part of Syria's capital believe more airstrikes against ISIS will do little to change the landscape of the country's civil war. Fred Pleitgen is in Damascus for a rare look at the mood there. And Fred, we know the country has a compulsory military conscription there. Just give us an understanding of how many people are estimated to be in the Syrian army, and how does it compare to the size of other forces within the region?
That's a very good question, Linda, and certainly it's unclear how many people were in the Syrian army to begin with. However, there are estimates that go to somewhere around 200 to maybe 220,000 people. But it's also, by the accounts of most international groups, they believe that the entity that has taken the most casualties since the beginning of Syria's civil war 4 years ago has indeed been the Syrian military. There are some people who put the casualty figures at somewhere between 50,000 and up to 80,000 soldiers. Now, it's no secret that Syria's military has, in some cases, had trouble keeping its manpower up to the size that it actually wants. And one of the things that has also happened is that they've created a second force, also with the help of the Iranians, called the National Defense Force, or NDF, to prop up the ranks. In the beginning, these NDF troops were used mainly at checkpoints, mainly used to secure areas where maybe there was less rebel activities. However, recently they have conducted more action on the battlefield as well, and have indeed become a very important fighting force for the Assad regime. And then you have another factor, which is foreign fighters loyal to the governments that are also fighting here in Syria. The most prominent would probably be Hezbollah, which are coming in from Lebanon. So there are many, many different places where the Syrian regime draws support from. However, it has had trouble maintaining the ranks. And that, of course, is something that's also played out in their fight against ISIS as well, because the Syrian regime does believe that it's the force that's taking the brunt of the attacks on ISIS. And if you look at the past couple of months, in places like Palmyra and other places as well, they have had some losses against ISIS in those areas, Lynda.
And Fred, obviously this civil war has dragged on for more than 4 years. We know President Bashar al-Assad recently said there will be a general amnesty for military deserters. Are there large amounts of deserters, and what does that policy indicate? Is the president absolutely desperate for more troops?
Well, I wouldn't say he's desperate yet. I do think that the Syrian military does have some problems replenishing its ranks. I do think that they do have a certain morale problem in certain places. However, one of the things we have to keep in mind is that there are actually also a lot of Syrians who are volunteering for the military as well. If you look, for instance, at places like Tartus, which is on the Syrian coast, which has always been a place that very much supports Bashar al-Assad, there have been a lot of military recruits coming from there as well. So I wouldn't say at this point the president is desperate. However, the fact that there has been this amnesty on people who have avoided the draft, also people who have deserted, does show that they are trying to get these people back into the fold somehow. Because, of course, after 4 years, this is a military that not only as far as its personnel has been decimated, but also as far as the equipment as well. If you look at the number of helicopters, the number of airplanes that are still actually capable of flying and capable of carrying out missions, it is a military that is stretched and is one that certainly in the past couple of weeks and past couple of months has had to concede some territory, not just to ISIS, but to other rebel factions as well, Lynda.
And Fred, we know that a number of Western governments have wanted President al-Assad gone for a very long time. Give us a sense of how much support he has within Syria.
That's a very good question, because what you have is you obviously have the rebel-controlled areas, areas that are not controlled by the government, where certainly he doesn't appear to have very much support at this point in time. But if you look at the places that are controlled by the government, I would say that many people who live in these places are actually more entrenched behind Bashar al-Assad than they were before, simply because a lot of them are afraid of what the alternative to Bashar al-Assad might be. They see the advances that ISIS has been making. They see groups like the Nusra Front. And certainly if you look at many of the secular people here in this country, and of course Syria was for a very long time and still very much is a country that really didn't have that many extremists. It is a country of secular people. And then you take a look at the minorities, the Alawites, the Christians, the Druze. They of course fear retribution if in fact the Assad regime falls. So the support base for Bashar al-Assad is not countrywide, but it is one that seems to be getting more entrenched as the civil war drags on and people, for instance, see the kind of atrocities that ISIS is committing in the places that it's taking over, Lynda.
And Fred, we know already an estimated 4 million people have fled. Just give us an understanding of the state of the economy, and from those you're speaking to are more wanting to simply pack up and seek refuge elsewhere.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about the Syrian economy is, of course, it is one that has taken a lot of hits. It's in dire straits. If you look at, for instance, the fuel situation here in Damascus, it's very difficult to get fuel, very difficult to get some medications. Also, the industrial complex has also suffered a great deal. But it is actually an economy that is fairly resilient. If you do go into stores here in Damascus, you can still get most of the products that you could probably get before the civil war broke out. A lot of that, of course, is very different when you look into rebel areas and areas, of course, where intense fighting is going on. So the economy has indeed suffered a lot. It is one that has been noted to be on the brink of collapse for a very long time, but is muddling through somehow. One of the other things, though, that we have to keep in mind when we talk about the amount of people that have fled the country is that a lot of people have, millions of people have, but a lot of people have also fled internally. They're internally displaced people, and many of them have fled to the government-controlled area. If you look at the areas here around Damascus, there's a lot of internally displaced people here. The coastal areas that have still been somewhat immune from the fighting so far. A lot of internally displaced people there as well. Towns like Tartus that are now 4 times as big as they were before. And that's also something that's making it very difficult, not just for the government, but also for international aid agencies to get these people what they need. Because in some cases, to bring supplies to internally displaced people to refugees, some of these aid convoys have to go through several front lines and deal with various rebel and pro-government factions to actually get these people what they need. So the economy is suffering, and a lot of people outside Syria are suffering, but also a lot of people internally displaced inside Syria are suffering a great deal as well. And that's one of the things that makes this civil war so tragic, Lynda.
Some great analysis there. Fred Pleitgen in Damascus, Syria. Thank you very much.